The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, welcome to a discussion with Henry Joseph. My name is Bruce Southworth. I'm a mystery book reviewer for Drood Review and Publishers Weekly. My guest today is Henry Joseph, as I mentioned. He's the author of a novel called Bloodwork, The New Rugged Cross, out May of 1994 from Gibbs Smith, publisher. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Let's just start perhaps by kind of recapping the plot a little bit. The main character is named Jack Lee. Jackson Robert E. Lee is his full name, right? And he had been tried for marijuana smuggling, as I understand, and acquitted. And we can maybe pick it up, see.
Jack Lee is one of the quintessential characters who, having led an outlaw life, feels that he's laid it to rest. Spends 3 years pretty much in solitude, reemerges into the world, finds love, and then his best friend is killed, and it sets his world on end. And from the moment he re-enters the old life, from the first step he takes backward, the plot unfolds. This is a book mostly about human choice and the often high price of remaining true to oneself.
And Jack has to, in the course of that, as you say, there are a lot of people that he's known in his life. Yates Murphy, a lawyer who wanted him to go on to law school and kind of fall into the system a little bit more, and a woman he met from Greenpeace, and he has to decide what's more important to him, this obligation in a sense to his best friend, or this new life in a way.
It's actually more an inner obligation. It's the friend is dead, that's over. It's just a real choice between a fascinating new life. This character is presented as having retired with $500,000, I think it's stated $500,000 cash, in a serious case of spiritual bankruptcy. And his choice is whether to proceed with the new life that's in front of him or make that step backward. And I've always been fascinated by characters who, moving that one step backward, found themselves on an irrevocable path. I mean, it's...
Do you think he's on an irrevocable path? I wonder, because
from the time he makes the first step, I mean, this is something, this is not giving the book away. The reader is informed early on to two things. First, that the antagonists are clearly defined early, so this is not a mystery in a classic sense. And they're also informed of the fact that Jack Lee does not know what he's going to do from moment to moment. He does not know, as he just basically inserts himself into situations, the result of which he has no idea.
It's kind of...
So it's not until the end of the book that he realizes what he's going to do, and it's rather horrible in terms of maintaining his own standard of himself.
His honor, his integrity in a way. And
far beyond honor or integrity. Those are two nice words for the emotions that finally stir him to his final action. It's far beyond honor.
His inner being, I guess.
More a sense of responsibility, and the acts that he's not driven to but led toward leave him with a sense ultimately of having fulfilled an obligation versus any honorable track.
Some of the other characters, which are delightfully drawn, I think one of the strengths of the book, of the many strengths, is the dialogue of the characters, the way the characters are drawn. They're very well fleshed out, even the ones that are relatively on the periphery. Two of my favorites are the Thin Man and a man named Lucy, which Anton Ledbetter is his real name, right?
You have a very delightful memory.
They're just such interesting, fascinating characters, but they seem to have a sense of obligation too, and
when
Jack.
When Jack Lee returns to that life, he turns to people whose words have been their bonds, and each of the characters that he is drawn toward have demonstrated prior histories of stand-up behavior, what we call stand-up behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And the Thin Man is, although drawn as a composite character,
Mm-hmm.
exists in a certain sense. These aren't fantastical characters.
These are bits and pieces of people that...
These are composites of people that I have known and who stand on their own merits, albeit unwilling to be named, proclaimed, or otherwise set forth in prose.
One of the things that I thought was kind of intriguing about this, their word is their bond, which was the expression that came to my mind as well, is that Jack Lee, Lucy the Thin Man, a few other people, they're kind of outside the bounds of the system in many respects, but the people who are you'd consider to be more mainstream, as it were, they're the ones who seem to be not, their word is not their bond necessarily. Some of the reporters or investigators, you know, they seem to be slightly more the slimy type, and it's kind of an interesting comparison.
That's the nature of their business, is to be equivocal
Mm-hmm.
and less than true. The characters outside the law live by a handshake, and often when you give the handshake, if your word's not good, you withdraw a wrist minus the hand. So we have dual sets of ethics.
Yeah, the contract prices are higher in that situation. That's very true.
Yeah, but you know, actually, the lady reporter is rather true.
Yeah, I mean, she's an exception.
She's trying to make an effort.
Mm-hmm. I thought that it was kind of interesting too, because she's not only a writer but a television reporter and whatnot, and
she's kind of a self-starter in terms of the media. She's
Yeah.
working hard angles, and
that struck me as kind of interesting, that one of the writing characters would be someone who is not necessarily good but thought of, and I thought that must perhaps mean that you kind of place some importance on the aspect of writing, that it's an honorable thing to do, if there's, use that word again.
Well, for your readers, this book and future books will stand on end the Starsky and Hutch theory of
investigating something.
Yeah, this is among the more honorable characters that I've ever met in my own life. The broader constituency exists outside the law. There's a more demanding imperative of people living on that edge than for those who live within the system and
go with that flow
and defer, demur, and otherwise
let other people make their choices. Maybe
send it upstairs or downstairs. So.
Talking about writers, shifting gears a little bit, James Crumley, who's a wonderful, wonderful writer, whose last book, toward the end of '93, Mexican Tree Duck, is a delightful book, was kind of played an important role in this book getting published.
I found myself writing essentially against the grain in terms of it's a very conservative buyer's market in terms of publishers right now.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Crumley, bless his heart, stood up for me when it counted. He put me in touch with my publisher, and obviously did a nice blurb on but anyway, he is one of our best kept American literary secrets.
I hope that he starts to get. I think there's a.
Well, people know of him, but
Yeah.
I would encourage anyone who enjoys the truths of America to give him a really strong read. But anyway, he was, and also a man named David Bottoms, who was a poet and novelist from Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
was also very helpful. And we know without their help, it's the material that I'm producing is difficult at best to place in the market. So yeah, my next book will be dedicated to Jim Crumley.
It seems very
Yeah.
appropriate. You had possibly a wider range of input, as well as I understand. You showed the manuscript of Bloodwork to 50, 60 people and got input.
What I did was take the book to when I use the word outlaw, I'm talking about working outlaws. I'm not talking about Willie Nelson and and I love Willie and I love Waylon.
Mm-hmm.
They're called musical outlaws. I'm talking about practicing people that live on the other side of way beyond the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent the book out to 50 or 60 people in hopes that I would get, an affirmative response to just the culture, the whole, just the day in, day out lifestyle feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, more or less doing my own test market.
Research.
And it turned out well.
I understand that you'd mentioned before that you connected with those people, that you knew you were on the right track and had the right feel for it well, and you had to fend off some suggestions, shall we say, from your editors too.
I had the amazing, and you must understand this is my first book, so I mentioned to you last night at dinner that I thought you wrote a book in a thunderstorm, held it up, lightning struck, and there we go. I had a copy editor challenge my use of the reference to Rhett Butler, which I found rather astounding, and notated on the side of the manuscript was, people in out-group situations do not enjoy in-group references. And this is a PhD of literature from some far-flung university. And fortunately, my developmental editor, who is a lady from Wales, I asked her, does the name Rhett Butler resonate in any? Of course.
I don't know how it wouldn't, but that's...
I was rather, I had a lot of battles. At the risk of being immodest, all of which I won. I just could not. It's interesting in that this business is participatory to the gender wars, which are now rampant. I have never seen anything quite like this before. So I had David Bottoms says, tough and muscular prose, masculine in the very best sense of the word, blah, blah, blah. Well, on the other hand, I had the experience of dealing with lady editors. I'm in my mid-40s. These ladies are in their 20s, just graduated from George Mason or whatever with their seminar backgrounds, and I had to have a very interesting time with the editorial process, but what can I say?
And you won the battles, and not much is actually changed.
This is as I wrote it.
That's as you wrote it.
Minus, the obligatory comma removals.
Those kinds of things.
Tense.
No, the next book is making the rounds currently. As I've lost the title, Dinosaur or something?
Dinosaur Heaven.
Dinosaur Heaven.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is, I've spoken with you before about the concept of sourdough writing, so as in using starter to bake the new loaf. Jack Lee is retained as a lead character, but not the lead character. He operates in an expanded ensemble cast.
The action.
The book is set in Georgia, Alabama, primarily in Brazil. And unbeknownst to many people, there was an expatriated community of Confederates who left the southern United States at the end of the Civil War rather than, quote, submit to the Yankee yoke, unquote. 20,000 or so went to Brazil at the behest of the Emperor Dom Pedro II.
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, and this new book has a couple of new characters that are Bobby Joe Looney and Devereaux Ledoux. One of the characters, Bobby Joe Looney, has second sight. It's an old Southern tradition to have a certain. There's a paranormal, supernatural aspect to this next book, which weaves a plot that runs from, circa 1865 up to the current date. Jack Lee this is a progression of his plot line from this book, and it melds with several other plot lines. Yeah.
You've mentioned too that this sort of sequence of characters is this ensemble, maybe some offstage, some onstage. You're hoping to carry through about 4 books or so?
I think.
Before moving into another direction?
At the moment, well, these characters have infected my blood, in a sense. And when I realized the second book was going to contain their energies, I thought, well, maybe 3, but now I say 4, and I have a feeling that by the time I hit 3 or 4, I may still be unhealed in terms of their stories. So.
How are you looking forward to try to avoid sort of the formula series? I mean, without falling into that trap, because there's...
Apparently my work is so far off the wall that I don't have that concern. Quirky, non-traditional, unacceptable, blatantly rampant are some of the terms that I've had fed back to me. I'm rather enjoying putting out material that offends the sensibilities of the formulaic.
That's very much like Jim Crumley. I had a conversation with him one time. He said,
I think he enjoys it also, and I would rather sell 10,000 books than 100,000, and put it out there the way I wrote it. I mean, my experience personally, sitting behind a typewriter, is that almost any writer, almost anyone fluent in the English language, can produce works of a formulaic nature which will sell. If you want to sell your soul, it's there to be. I mean, there's a market for souls. I mean, take it out there, sell it, get your best price.
So you're not a great fan of a lot of the formula genre series.
I know what they're doing. I respect them in the sense that I understand that even to write formulaic work requires a discipline and just a certain work ethic. But beyond that, I have no respect. None.
This may tie into this a little bit. Would you consider yourself in that respect or any other respect then a sort of an outlaw in the same sense that because you're sort of staying out of that what is very marketable right now?
It's a very overused word. It's almost to the point of ultimate cliche. What I would counter, and this is an oblique approach to your question, but I think anyone who writes day to day from the heart is in trouble in terms of the market. The strictures and demands of the market right now are overweening. There is a definite, and and I've called it implicit censorship.
Mm-hmm.
That's operating in the market not only in terms of character and plot. The direction I'm speaking of is almost so unreined that I can imagine a point at which, in 10 years, you'll be handed a handbook and told to fill in the characters and the locales.
Mm-hmm.
We already have the plot. We already have the direction. Outlaw is America's always glamorized outlaws. They've almost made outlaws of any writer who wants to write his own material or her material. So I have obviously strong feelings about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, my opinion would be that you could certainly fall into that camp, whatever the catchword would certainly be of that.
It's pretty amazing that I mentioned to you, I had, this is either Jim Harrison or Tom McQueen, and both of them have current editorial pieces ongoing in Esquire magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Harrison who mentioned it. And Harrison's been published for maybe 20 years and is considered to be a literary author whose work, and I love his work.
Mm-hmm.
And he just brought to the fore, and it was, I think the situation was he was having a discussion with fellow writers,
Mm-hmm.
and mentioned that no one was writing on spec anymore. And formerly, a writer would sit down and write what he, she, or it wanted to write,
Several chapters.
and then submit it.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's plot formulation by committee. You go to the publisher. In other words, no one writes on spec. So what are you writing from? I mean, it's a very interesting question for all of us.
Yeah, it's as though the guidelines, parameters flow down, as you say, from the top, and then.
Which is the ultimate form of censorship. I mean, it is peremptory versus peremptory versus overt. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even need to be told anymore. So I was this article I'm talking about was published in Esquire maybe. Can I use a date? Roughly in the late 80s, I think.
Okay.
And at this point, this was an admission by practicing writers that to write on speculation was almost a dead-end street.
That's kind of scary, especially late 80s. I mean, and certainly it's progressed and
It's worsened.
continuing. Yeah.
I believe it's worsened. So
You've traveled quite a bit. In the jacket blurb, you describe a willing victim of wanderlust, which is a
that actually was my line. It's a bad line, but I used it.
Well, it's kind of telling.
Yeah.
But now you graduated from the University of Georgia,
Yeah.
and from that time, about that time, you disappeared and roamed the world for about 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
What kinds of things did you explore or do, or were you just wanting to see what was there?
I basically, there's no line about the character who walks out for a pack of cigarettes and shows up 3 years later. I was 15 years getting back.
Beyond that by the
I
time.
just went out and wandered, and I graduated high school in the mid '60s,
Mm-hmm.
so I was part of that crowd. And when I dropped hard, and just. I did the India thing, went and groped for the brass ring of self-realization.
And what made you realize that the time was come to stop and move back to the hills outside of Atlanta? And
when travel and exotic places lose their charm, it's rather self-evident that it's time to. I had burned out the impulse, so to speak, and I'd known since I was a kid that I was going to write. I had, whatever. I was verbally precocious, and
Didn't I read somewhere, or maybe you told me, that you had a couple of short stories published way back when in your junior college or something?
In college, yeah. And
Now, were those in like
they were
school
in
publications?
little literary journal type things.
Mhm.
And,
What were they like? Are they? What types
one
of-
was called The 36-Inch Life,
Sounds
and
interesting.
one was called The Bittersweet Revelation, and they were rather straight ahead, obvious, meanderings by a child that wanted to be free. The 36-Inch Life was the major line in the story was God bless the bees and the ants, and it was about a society constructed on
Mm-hmm.
the efficiency of bees and ants,
Okay.
at which the end of when students matriculated from this culture, they had to walk across a bridge and walk in a certain step pace, and if they didn't maintain a certain step pace, they fell to their deaths.
Hmm.
The Bittersweet Revelation was about a child who went into something like what today we'd call a Kmart,
Mm-hmm.
and feasted upon several chocolate icons, Yahweh, Jesus, blah, 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 and pukes it up, and that's his bittersweet revelation is that, so I mean, these are rather, like I say, obvious.
Well, they sound like very, very promising beginnings, though. I mean, they sound wonderful.
Well, they were.
And you didn't write anything between that time and the time that you wrote
I
Blood
wrote
Work?
my mother and dad some postcards from around the world in between, and then I sat down and started writing book-length fiction, which is,
Kind of a major
most-
shift, yeah.
most folks start with a short story or whatever, and
You're gonna go for it. Gonna go for
I
the whole thing.
went for the 5-course meal. I mean, yeah, and which was it's a rather demanding task.
Was as a new writer, first time writer, did you have an agent for this?
No,
Did you?
no.
You had gotten in touch with Jim Crumley and he helped, but you do have one for the second book, as I understand it. Has that been in?
I've finally. I think the system is. It is basically acknowledged that it's almost as hard to find a good agent as it is to find a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And often agents are much more receptive if you have a book out there. So they're coming at step 2.
Yeah, kind of the old catch-22 in many regards.
Yeah. So I basically this book made the rounds of 15 publishers or so in New York, and I was told flat out that due to the nature of the content, forget whether it's well written, whether it works as a book, the content of this book will not be published in New York, and surely enough, it wasn't.
Hmm.
And I called Jim Crumley, and he had read the book and liked it, and was willing to be helpful.
Great. I hate to interrupt you at this point.
Is it over?
Your journey. We have to end. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
it. Yeah, it's been great to be here.
Thank you.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.